Hey folks, welcome to this episode of the Texas Titans podcast. I am so grateful for you tuning in, and I hope your 2020 is off to a great start. Today is part 2 of the Austin Eudaly interview, in which he discusses his upcoming documentary that he's producing called Uncommon Fellows. This will have Tim Keller, Richard Dawkins, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, and several other theological and intellectual luminaries discussing their philosophies, their views on life, and not having a debate, just having conversations. It was Austin's idea to take these guys into the mountains, let them break bread, go on long walks, and have a camera rolling and just listen in to what these great minds of our time have to say about some of those most pressing issues from antiquity to present day and everything in between, to give a better understanding of not only where one another is coming from, but so that we could see and process for ourselves some things that we may not know, we may not understand. So I think it's going to be an incredible project. And also, it's just kind of interesting and funny in a way listening to Austin tell this story of how, for instance, he was able to get to Richard Dawkins. I mean, imagine this. An oil and gas guy from Texas shows up at Oxford University asking for one of their most prominent professors to speak to because he wants him to be in his documentary. And mind you, he had never done a documentary in his life. So it's quite remarkable listening to Austin's determination and his perseverance and getting to Professor Dawkins and how that finally happened, and how this, in my opinion, is going to be not only a great and fascinating documentary, but an important one, especially for a time such as this, in this era of just polarization and tribalism that we're living in. I really think that Austin's onto something. So I'm glad you're here. I think you're going to enjoy the conversation. And as always, thank you. Please go out, give us a rating on iTunes. I need your support. I'm grateful for your support. And now I just want you to sit back and enjoy this episode of the Texas Titans podcast. Thanks, folks.
Every time I kind of finished a project, I'd take a little time off and rest. And so I went to, I don't remember where I went that time, but I went and camped out and fly fished or something and kind of gathered my thoughts. Well, then, so my journey starts in Austin, Texas, going down to hang out with our mutual friend Luke Coffey, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, Luke, I just left the energy business. I've got this crazy idea, and you're nervous to share the idea, right? Because I'm worried someone's gonna be like, that's a terrible idea.
Of course, of
course. So I guess I'm digressing, but anyways, we see a extreme amount of divisiveness in the world. Uncommon Fellows is a invitation to courageous thought leaders, and it's an invitation to not get together and have a debate where someone's got to win and lose.
Yeah,
it's an invitation to what I say, perhaps lay down your swords and seek human fellowship again. And let's talk about some of life's biggest questions, because these are important things to talk about.
Yeah.
But to do it in a compassionate way.
Right.
So when I say human fellowship, we're going to do 4 days in a small, out in the mountains in the middle of nowhere. And it'll be the group of guys sharing meals and going on walks together.
Yeah.
And having fun. I mean, we're going to have some concerts.
Yeah.
We're going to don't tell, I don't know if these guys would want to do it, but it'd be kind of fun if they all went on a river rafting trip together.
Right. Absolutely.
Richard Dawkins, Rowan Williams, Tim Keller going down the Taylor River, that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what Uncommon Fellows is. And we have an amazing group of people as the participants right now. I am so honored to partner with these guys. I mean, we the way we've organized it is we have an atheist, we've got a kind of more conservative Christian, we'd have what people in America would see as a more liberal Christian.
Yep.
We have a Jewish rabbi, we have a Muslim scholar, and now we have kind of like someone that I would say has a transcendent faith, maybe a bit more spiritual, and I'm not even sure, but we're trying to get a blend of women and men, right? Like it can't just be men, because then there's not going to be any compassion in the conversation.
Right.
So our cast is, Timothy Keller from Redeemer Press in New York City, Richard Dawkins from Oxford,
Right.
Dr. Rowan Williams, the former head of the Church of England,
Yep.
Rabbi Angela Buchtal from New York City from Central Synagogue, Dr. Arif Ali Nayed, who currently lives in Dubai, but he's originally from Libya, former Libyan ambassador to the UAE, and now had a really big, really exciting development in getting Krista Tippett on board.
Oh, wow.
2.5 weeks ago.
Fantastic.
So, and she's got the On Being podcast. And
Yep.
man, I mean, like that was, to be honest, I had pitched 20 different women and I wasn't getting anybody to say yes. Rabbi Buchtal was the only one to say yes. And I was like, why and I don't know if maybe there's some intimidation factor or something like that. But anyways, in an ideal world, I've tried to, this is a funny story. When I bought Minerals, I'd cold call.
Yeah.
I'm a decent cold caller, so I cold called Oprah's office.
Nice.
And I was like, hey, I was going to see if I could talk to somebody maybe about this documentary project I'm working on. And the woman, she was nice, and she goes, do you have an introduction? And I was like, no. I was like, but my wrinkle spray was in her magazine in April.
There you go.
And she goes, you don't have an introduction though. I go, no, I don't have an introduction. I go, what's your name? And she's like, Jennifer or something. I'm like, hey, Jennifer, I'm Austin. I was like, I'm from Dallas. I was like, where are you from, Jennifer? And she's talking, I'm like, so we kind of know each other. Could you be my introduction? She'll click, So, I'm hopeful that maybe Oprah would consider this, or I want to get, we have a good blend of diversity, but I need some more. I want to have even more diversity.
Yeah.
So, we have an amazing musician named Ryan O'Neill from Sleeping at Last, who's going to help out with some of the music. I do want to get some more musicians involved. And I got to give a shout out to a guy named Alistair McGrath at Oxford who came up with this idea. I mean, Alistair was like, Austin, I'm sitting in this courtyard with Alistair after I had just gotten rejected by some people. And I was feeling pretty low, and Alistair said, I think, think about this. I think it's a good idea, Austin. This is kind of needed. And, your problem is going to be all these scholars are going to be talking, and we talk at a level that we all understand, but it might not be digestible for the regular human. So he's like, I like your idea of having some younger musicians, so then it brings the conversation down. It's a little more digestible.
But you know what, Austin? See, here's the thing where I think that you're really onto something. Jordan Peterson,
right?
If you listen to him in his lectures, he tells people that the intellectual crowd, their minds are being blown that people are listening to them the way they are. I mean, look at Jordan Peterson as a rock star, and this is an intellectual scholar.
I'm a big Peterson fan.
Yeah, and I mean, these are guys that are talking about meaty, hard subjects that I think the general public has been so dumbed down and so intellectually insulted that they're craving and they want to hear some big hard questions and then hear the sometimes very simple, delicate answers to. And so I think that it'll be awesome, and I think that the consumption of the content that you guys produce, I think it's gonna be very surprising. And so I understand why as an intellectual why you would think that, and it's not even him looking down on the quote unquote lay person. It's just saying, hey, look, it's like a physician trying to talk to a farmer about heart transplants and all the things going, but. No, that's not it. It's just him saying, I don't know that we'll relate, but in fact, I think you guys, I think it's wonderful, and I'm the same way. And let's talk about let's get philosophical for a little bit because the listener, I love to leave them with tidbits on importance and the importance of different steps you can take to make your life better. And I think one of the things that this project does, and that it's kind of the fruit of, is you being not nasal gazing, but looking inwardly and going, who am I?
Yeah.
Let's confirm or negate some beliefs
Right.
that I may have. That C.S. Lewis, who we're a mutual fan of, he said, God is the great vivisector, which essentially, for those of you who don't know what a vivisector is, it's basically, imagine having surgery with no anesthesia. That's what happens. So I think that's what true self-reflection is when you go ahead and you take the scalpel to your heart, to your mind, and go, who am I? And either go, I like what I see, I'm going to build upon it, be able to cut out the cancers that present themselves and go, I got to get rid of that. I knew it was there, but now I see it.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And that's what I try to preach to my daughters. Know who you are. And it's cool to hear you say that you went on this journey to lead to Uncommon Fellows, because Abby, my youngest, who's in Boulder, she's going through this right now. She told me over this Christmas break, she said, Dad, I've started watching some YouTubes. There's some atheists that she's listening to. She goes, I feel confident enough in my beliefs as a Christian that I'm willing to go listen to what they have to say. So
Right,
I said, sweetheart, that's how I learned who
Don't be
Christopher
afraid of
Hitchens
it.
was.
Yeah,
I mean, you be comfortable and understand, and it's okay to explore the different thoughts, and so she's kind of trying to understand herself better in that regard. So I would just tell the listener, and what you've heard Austin say is, don't be afraid, because most of us, I think it was Beth Moore who said this one time, the author and Bible teacher out of Houston that's been so popular. She said, most of us go to church or we walk around in the witness protection program. We're all putting on this kind of facade of who we really are.
Wow.
But the cool thing is, like what you've done, and what I've tried to do, and why, again, this is why I'm on a podcast, is why I'm writing and speaking, is because if you will truly peel back the layers, take the mask off, and be honest with yourself and go, here's who I really am. Here's what makes me happy. Here's what makes me excited. Here's the gift I would like to present to the world. You can only find out what that thing is by truly getting real with yourself. And it sounds almost cliche, but you better be ready, because it's tough.
I got a quote for you. Hold on one second. So, Andrew Lawson, who is my former, business partner at Flatiron, has been helpful for me in my faith journey.
Yeah.
And we send each other encouraging things, and have kind of walked maybe a similar path of wrestling through some faith things.
Sure.
And Andrew sent this, and talking about knowing who you are, like it's easy to forget that you and I, when Genesis 1:27 says you're an imago Dei human being, right? Like, what is that? What does that mean to me? I mean, I remember thinking, what does that mean to be imago Dei? It's like that. There's 100 billion stars in the galaxy. Does that mean God has skin? If God exists, it's like, no. With what, Francis Collins just cracking the human genome, and we see the complexity. We understand how complex our brains are and how our cells all operate together. Maybe what it means is that somehow, the logos of the universe is interwoven in our DNA.
Yeah.
So if that's true, and I reject a people group, I'm actually rejecting a piece of that logos.
That's absolutely right.
Right.
I could not agree more.
And so, that's why it's important to get together and fellowship with people that disagree with you.
Absolutely.
Right?
And it's one of the things, too, what you just said is very much why I think Stoic philosophy and Christian philosophy, for, philosophy, belief, whatever, match up so well.
Yeah.
Is because, the Stoics, that's what they believe. They when they refer to God, they're actually referring to Epictetus and those guys. They're an energy, a force of the universe. It's kind of, imagine us all as molecules operating in this one sphere together.
Yeah.
So therefore, if someone doesn't believe the way I can't control, I can only control me, and they are but a mere portion of the universe that has come before me that, all I'm going to do is I'm going to react in kind. I'm not going to let them determine my reaction, but I'm going to control what I can control. And I think when you do get into this mindset that, hey, we're all stuck on this ball of mud and water together.
Right.
And you're no more important of a part than he or she is, then it just makes sense to, at least, to your point, understand that force that is not you, that other individual, to
Right.
figure out where they're coming from. You'll be a lot better off than just going, I reject you,
Right,
go away,
right.
you know? So I think this is really cool. So what's the timeline on the project, and when will we be able to see it?
Well, yeah, just before I segue, I want to say, like, you know, you grow up in a place like Texas, and you're conditioned to think that, well, that's a people group that's my enemy.
Mm-hmm.
The greatest, what shows you why we need to be talking with each other and why it's important and probably vital as human beings around the planet. The greatest lesson I've ever learned about compassion comes from Dr. Arif Nayat.
Mm-hmm.
When I was on this ocean with him in Dubai, and we're sunsetting, and, you know, Arif says this, and I'll say this because it's a powerful message. Arif said, and Arif was saying, like, Austin, you know, God or Allah, he is the definition of compassion. And Arif is a Sufi Muslim, so it's kind of this mystical,
Sure.
you know, he said, he is the definition of compassion. And I was like, you know, Arif, what do you mean by that? You know, like, he goes, I want you to imagine that, you know, a 25-year-old guy is bitter and angry, and he goes into a bar and he shoots up some people and kills them. You know, what would you say about him? I was like, well, he probably should go to jail for the rest of his life, and he's probably going to hell. You know, and he goes, Austin, what if that 25-year-old, from the time he was 1, never had a shred of love showed to him by his parents? In fact, his parents called him a piece of crap every day, and no one ever cared about him, and, like, people told him that the best way to get to heaven was to do this or whatever. He said, does God not have compassion on even him? And I was like, whoa, you know, like, man, I hope he does. You know, I hope he does. Now, within, just like Christianity, each religion has these sects that were, it's pretty easy to see. It's like, if it's loving and compassionate, it's probably good. Yeah. If it's violent and hateful, it's probably not good. Like, it doesn't have to be rocket science, you know?
Right.
So, you know.
Right.
Anyways, and we could probably offline get way more philosophical, but one other guy I'm trying to invite, which he's been encouraging for me to read. I don't know if you've read any Richard Rohr.
No.
I've literally had 15 people be like, can you get Richard Rohr involved? And, like, I've read all his work. Now, let's say people in the South would probably not resonate with some of the stuff. They'd be like, oh, he's super liberal. But it's like, look, just listen to him. Don't be scared of it. Yeah. You know, like, yeah, I mean, he's a human being. He might be wrong on some things.
Right.
Just like, take everything I say on this with a grain of salt. Like, I'm not right on everything. You're not right everything. Like, right? We're just trying to humbly learn and learn from each other, right? And I've learned from you in this podcast, and maybe hopefully you learned something from me.
Yeah.
So I just think we would do a little bit better as a country, as a world, loving our neighbors as ourselves.
Absolutely.
Literally loving our enemies.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's like, oh, that's not rocket science, you know?
Right.
So...
Well, one of the things that, along these lines, I think that the Uncommon Fellows, what we'll see is, and it was an epiphany that came to me the other day. I was sitting down and I was thinking to myself, you know, you take two people that are on polar opposites, I don't call it race, maybe it's political or whatever. 9 times out of 10, all things being equal, if those two people sit down, don't know anything about each other, they're going to get along, right? Yeah. They're going to be fine. I mean, because while I do believe that bigotry and racism, it still exists, but by and large, if you just go take 10 people and you take 2 of them, put them down at the table and sit them down to talk,
yeah,
they're gonna be fine. They're gonna get along. Now, and so what they would do is if they have these ideas and these beliefs about other groups, ultimately at the end of that conversation, they'd probably go, yeah, I can't stand them, but I like you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I can't stand all the rest of them, but I like you. So what I think, if people would just stop and go, wait a minute, that group that you're categorizing is made up of individuals that if you just pluck one of them out and sit them in front of you and have a conversation,
Yeah.
you'd probably like them, and you'd end up and you'd feel silly, but because that's what you do. You'd have to come up with going, no, it's all of them I don't
Yeah.
like, but you're okay. You're
Yeah,
good.
you
know,
you find the common ground, right?
Yeah.
And it's like we were talking, Arthur Brooks, former president of AEI,
Yep.
wrote this book called Love Your Enemies, How to Overcome the Culture of Contempt. Well, how do you do it? You go sit down with someone that disagrees with you, and then what you realize is like, you have a mom and dad too. That's cool. Like,
right.
oh, you've got a crazy aunt too. And it's like you find the common ground, and then you're like, well, this is a human being that's not so bad. And it's the 5% of things that are getting weaponized, and they're getting weaponized to wedge voting blocks.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And so it's time for people to see through that, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read this quote real quick. I'm going to go back to what you said earlier, which I think was really important. Knowing who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I think, who's the guy that sings Toy Story? Is it Randy Newman?
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Chance the Rapper, and I don't know if you listen to any Chance's stuff.
My daughters have been to multiple Chance the Rapper concerts, but
Chance,
I have not.
Chance,
But they tell me he's great.
I'm going to give a shout out to these guys because they're putting out real art.
Yep.
Chance the Rapper, Francis and the Lights, Justin Vernon, Bon Iver, Kanye. These guys are all like working together and stuff. Now, like, look, say what you will about like people are like, oh, they're involved. It's like, look, they're putting out real art.
Right.
They're not being told by record label authorities like, this is what we need you to write songs about taking shots.
Right.
Right. So anyways, Randy Newman has this line on it's called 5-Year Plan. The song is a great song. Everybody should listen to it. And he goes, the time has come to be who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if you don't know who you are, then you can't be who you are.
Absolutely.
And so, and this goes back, this is a quote actually from On Being Podcast, Krista Tippett, by the way. Vic, how we doing, buddy?
Hey, Vic. Welcome to the Texas Titans podcast. Man.
Hey, this should be your next, this guy's a Texas Titan too.
Come on.
Yeah. No, Vic, don't sell yourself short.
Come on.
So, this was a late Scottish poet, or he's Irish or Scottish, named John O'Donoghue. Brilliant. Everybody should check out his stuff. He said, and he's quoting a guy named Meister Eckhart, that was a German theologian, I think in the 14th century. And he said, Meister Eckhart said, there's a place in the soul that neither time nor space nor created thing can touch. And I really thought that was amazing. And what it means is that your identity is not equivalent to your biography, and that there's a place in you where you've never been wounded, where there's still a sureness in you, where there's a seamlessness in you, and where there's a confidence and tranquility within you. And I think the intention of prayer, spirituality, and love is every now and then to visit that inner sanctuary.
I like that.
Right? And so
Love that.
but if you don't even know that inner sanctuary's there,
Yeah.
right? Then how do you even know who you are?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that resonated with me.
I love that, and it goes back to that whole Stoic philosophy, which is, happiness, if it lies within you. To your point, if it's truly within the innermost being that is you, you're not impacted by the things outside the world, and you're that is a much more elegant and sophisticated version of what Andy Dufresne in the Shawshank Redemption, if you'll remember, he gets the prisoner's library. They finally get it open, and they send a bunch of records. And he starts playing. I think it might have been I don't think it was it might have been the Marriage of Figaro that he starts playing, and he puts it over the loudspeaker to the yard of the prison, and they eventually throw him into solitary confinement. And he comes out, and all of his buddies ask him, how was it? And he goes, easiest time I ever served. And I said, oh, come on. He said, no. He said, because I had Mozart to keep me company. I believe that's what he said.
Wow. And
they're like, what, they let you listen to music? Or they might have said that, but he's like, no, I had it here. And he points to his head. He said, and here. And he points to his heart. He said, they can never take that away.
Yeah.
And if people would start to understand that it is what is within that no one sees, but only you. Control that, nurture that, feed that, and then all of a sudden, everything that you see that's external to your being, it has such a minimizing impact on your life. And I think that's what that quote states. That's what Andy Dufresne is saying. It's like, look, throw me in solitary confinement. What's within me, you can't get to. Until I'm dead, it's within me. You can't touch it. And right now, so many people are letting external forces drive their actions and reactions. And so I'm with you, man. It is a fun topic. We could maybe we should start a whole podcast on that, on just how to get along, right?
Yeah, I mean, and talking about that inner sanctuary, that's where Richard Rohr's been helpful for me to have some healing, and guys like Tim Keller, Rowan Williams, and even that's the thing is like, here's what's crazy about the whole documentary is like people will Richard's become a friend. Dawkins, he's an amazing guy, very courageous, and Richard's been, for the last 10 years, gets death threats from Christians, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's loving your enemy, and so, and isn't it amazing, like the story is that like it starts with me reading it, and like now we're making this thing, and hopefully people want to know, well, what's your angle? What's your agenda like on this thing? I'm like, look, it's just to love people.
Yeah.
That's just, if we can have less hate and have more joy and more hope and more love, then this project should get made.
And to take something very deep and very meaningful and bring it to a, I don't want to say shallow or self-serving arena, to the listener out there, what Austin has described to this process. I mean, an oil and gas guy decides to be a documentary filmmaker. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to make the cold call to the landowner to say, hey, you want to sell your minerals? You want to lease your minerals? I'm here. Have that conversation. Same with, you want to make a documentary? Go figure out. You want to start a podcast? Go do like I did. Pull up Tim Ferriss YouTube of Tim Ferriss podcast equipment, and where Tim describes to you every single piece of equipment that I have sitting on this desk right now.
Yeah.
It's like you are the only limiter of what you pursue and what you want to do. And I think it's so cool that you're exercising that. And I think, again, that goes back to that entrepreneurial spirit. How many times do entrepreneurs succeed just because they go, yeah, I don't care who says it's stupid. It's what I want to do. So watch this.
Well, it's like, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
I get told no.
Yeah.
My job as a mineral buyer was to get told no. For every 100 people I approached, I'd get cussed out 5 times. I'd get 30 heck no's. I'd get blah, blah, blah. And I got one deal. You tell me no, it's like, that's like, well, that was my job for 10 years.
Right.
I don't know how much time we have left, but I do want to tell one really cool story from the documentary. This is probably my favorite story because, so you step out in the wilderness and, Luke, back to Luke Coffey. Luke also is making an incredible movie about his life story called Texas Angel. And
which now, again, if you're willing to step out and do something crazy like start a podcast, you may get involved with making a movie.
Maybe Vic's going to make a movie.
Come on in, Vic. I mean, Luke has, I think, turned both of us into movie producers, so we never had, but that's awesome.
So Luke's like, well, look, Austin. I was like, Luke, this is my idea. And he's like, great idea. He's like, here's what you need to do. He's like, for you to have any traction, you literally have to go out and get these people to commit. You can have an idea, but to go and pitch an idea to a network or to a director, like they're going to be like, who do you have on board, right? Like, and first off, like, who the heck are you, Austin? It's like, well, yeah, I've been doing this energy deal for the last 10 years. Now I'm going to be a filmmaker. It's like, so I'm like, okay, my top 2 guys were Tim Keller and Richard Dawkins. And that was like the original vision I had when I was in Denver. And so I managed to get, a line into Tim Keller. Shout out to a guy here in Dallas named Skip Ryan, who was very, graciously used to live on Tim's couch or something like that, and introduced me to Tim. And Skip's a great guy. And anyways, like I said, the first deck that I had, the idea, it was not good, and he. If you're a Tim Keller, you look at this deck, it's like, here's this guy that's never made a movie. here's this guy that doesn't have any other people together, like, and he gets 1,000 requests a day, and he's just like a no. And I was like, you know, this is a pretty big punch to the gut. You know, I was like, this is supposed to happen. You know, this is supposed to happen. And so then I was like, okay, well, I have to go try and get Richard Dawkins. And so, well, how do you pitch Richard Dawkins a documentary idea? I start emailing these people. I'm trying to call people. I'm cold calling his foundation, you know, just crickets. And I was like, okay, Austin, if this was a mineral deal, what would you do? I was like, I'd book a flight to Oxford and go just show up. And so I literally just book a flight to Oxford and I show up. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to get introduced to a guy named John Lennox, who is just an amazing guy. He's a mathematician at Oxford that's been in a debate before with Richard. And I thought, so I was able to get my foot in the door with John, and I was going to be like, hey, John, how do you think I should, how would I meet Richard? And he's like, oh, Austin, you know, he's pretty busy. He's not really here in Oxford much. And I was like, but, you know, and John at least encouraged the project. Yeah. And so I just go over to New College, and I was like, is Richard Dawkins here? Literally.
Yeah.
And they're like, who are you? And I was like, well, I'm all the way from Texas. I'm just, you know, kind of here to see if I could talk to him. They're like, no. You know, like, so I was like, well, can I at least see the president of the college? And they lead me into the president of this college. And the guy was nice enough to take this meeting, which is incredible because you know, and I'm sitting in this high vaulted room at New College in Oxford, and there's a roaring fire and these giant bookshelves, and the president comes in, and I don't know if he had a pipe or not, but he's British. And, and I go, well, I've got this idea for this documentary, and this is the idea, and I'd like to see if Richard's involved. And like, he looks at me, he goes, are you serious? he goes, Richard Dawkins doesn't return my emails. Best of luck to you. And so, I mean, I was just like totally deflated. I'm like, what am I doing? I am insane. This is, you know, all my friends that thought I'm insane. This is, of course I'm insane.
Yeah.
You know, like for me to even think I could try this. And, you know, luckily, you know, Alistair McGrath gave me enough encouragement and said, Austin, this is a good idea. You know, you should go do it. And it was like, I went from being like completely down in the dumps, like just a small little wind in the sail going. And I was like, okay, well, if I was doing a business deal and this was a mineral deal, like what would I do if they weren't at home? I was like, well, I'd try and go figure out where they were. So you know, well, he was in Switzerland. Well, that was probably not in the card. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go, Richard's foundation is in DC. And so I email a wonderful woman named Robin Blumner, and she runs his foundation. And Robin probably was extremely skeptical, you know, of who I was. But I was like, hey, Robin, I'm going to be out at this dinner in DC, and can we grab lunch? I've got an idea to pitch to you. Yeah. And she's like, sure. And so we have lunch, and, you know, like there again, like, you know, if you'd asked me in high school, like, you're going to go meet with this atheist woman that runs Richard Dawkins Foundation, it's like, oh, she's the enemy. But we end up having lunch, and like we're talking about, she's like, well, this guy's not so bad. And I'm like, well, she's not so bad. And she's like, Austin, you're kind of interesting. She goes, look, here's the deal. There's a skeptics conference in Las Vegas in a month. She's like, if you come to the skeptics conference, I'll make sure you meet Richard. And I was like, really? And she's like, absolutely. So I go to this skeptics conference, and which was really fascinating. Like, people would hear that. It's not like bashing religion. It's actually more bashing like pseudoscience and like crap nutrition science and all this stuff, like that all these companies that have like pay these people to write bad reports. Right. And it actually taught me how to like look at stuff like that, which was fascinating. So Richard's the keynote speaker there. Well, there's like a couple thousand people there. And, you know, Richard's out in this lobby, and, you know, he's not very tall. He's not a very big guy, and he's got these big kind of bifocals, and Robin looks at me. She's like, hey, come over here. Come over here. So Robin taps on Richard's shoulder and goes, hey, Richard, this is Austin Eudaly. He's from Dallas, Texas. He's the one I told you about. He's got the documentary idea, And Richard kind of looks at me. He goes, yes. And then he turns and walks off. And I was like,
That was a fruitful meeting.
I was like, what happened, Robin? She goes, stick with it. There's a dinner tonight. See if you can find him at the dinner. So I'm like at this dinner, there's like 500 people there. Funny enough, like randomly sit down next to Lawrence Krauss at the dinner.
Wow.
And I'm like, got an eye on like Professor Dawkins over in the corner. Well, I see him spring to go get a glass of wine by himself. And I'm like, this is your chance.
Yep.
I was like, you've pitched so many deals and you've been built for, you've just go tell them the deal, And so, well, I had done some, you kind of can't just go into a meeting like this cold. I had done some research on like things that Richard liked, and so I'm trying to find common ground, right? I'm trying to he's probably going to be standoffish because so many people have attacked him. And, so I was like, Richard, I'm Austin. Robin introduced us earlier. And he's like, oh, yeah, I remember you. And I was like, well, look, here's my idea. I was like, I don't want to take much of your time. I was like, I think the problem is that like people aren't talking to each other anymore. Like we're just firing long range missiles at each other, right? He's like, yeah, I agree with that. I was like, well, what if we didn't have this debate? But what if we had like 6 or 7 global thought leaders with different backgrounds? And it's like not this like combative thing. It's like you guys go out to the mountains, share meals, go on walks, take your time, like get to know each other. And that's the thing. I was like, and this thing will change. It evolves. I don't know like what it will be exactly, but he's like, yes, I like that idea, Austin. And I'm like, okay, we're going somewhere. I was like, well, I had talked to a guy named Rabbi Jonathan Sachs at the AEI dinner. He was the keynote speaker at the AEI dinner the night before that I was at.
Right.
And AEI is a nonpartisan, free enterprise think tank. Great group. And when I talked to Rabbi Sachs, I was like, Rabbi Sachs, I've got this idea, and I know you've met Richard Dawkins before, and like blah blah blah. And he's like, Austin, that's a lovely idea, but I'm writing a new version of the Torah right now. It's my life's work. So he's like, I'm out of pocket for like a year and a half. Right. And I was like, but he's like, if it's still going and, if you still haven't had it done in a year and a half, like come back to me. So I told Richard, I said, Richard, and I knew Richard liked Rabbi Sachs or like they were friends. And I was like, and I've got Rabbi Sachs and he's potentially interested in the project. He's like, yes, I like Rabbi Sachs. And I was like, okay. I'm like, should I ask for backtrack? Like, when I got encouraged by Alistair McGrath, I was like, well, Alistair, if this thing's ever comes together, would you be interested to get involved? And he's like, I would. And so I was like, well, that's something, right? Yeah. Like, and Alistair's great. Now, what's interesting is like, Richard wrote God Delusion. Alistair wrote Dawkins Delusion in response to that. Right. So I was like, well, this would be an interesting pairing if we could see like 2 guys that were enemies lay down swords and like get along. You know? So I go to Richard. Do you blank out expletives here?
No. There's no editing.
Well, I'm not. I won't out of respect to the situation. I go well, and I maybe swipe that from the record. I don't want it to be known that that Richard cussed.
No.
Okay.
Fine.
But it's interesting because I go, and I've already got a professor who's also at Oxford that's interested in doing as well. Maybe you know him. It's Alistair McGrath. He goes, who? Like he didn't hear. And I go, he's at the college across the street from me. I forget Alistair's college. Alistair McGrath? He goes, all of a sudden it hits me. He goes, McGrath? More or less, heck no, I wouldn't, and he just storms off, right? And I'm like, well, that seals the deal. This thing is done. Put a nail in the coffin. I have now officially embarrassed myself. I'm at a skeptics conference in Las Vegas at some pirate treasure hotel.
That should be the documentary. Yeah.
So, and I'm laying there at night, and like this is where like, okay, maybe there's some, force of love guiding this thing, right? And I'm laying there at night, and I'm like, okay, that was a crash and burn. But I was like, okay, well, how can I talk to Richard one more time? I was like, well, he's signing books in the morning. Well, I had told Richard as a way to kind of joke with him, I was like, hey, Richard, I owe you $20. I never paid for that book at Barnes & Noble, right? So I was like, I'm going to go buy the book, and I'll be the first in line to get it signed, and I'll have one more thing to say to him,
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I could say. I didn't have anybody else. Who was I going to say that was going to get involved? And so like that, and I remembered, like, I can remember it, and there's this wonderful woman in Oxford, and I forget her name, but she lives at the top of Headington Hill, and it was a random Airbnb stay. And I'm staying at this woman's house, and she's like, so what's a Texan doing here in Oxford, young man? And I'm like, well, I've got this idea for this documentary, and I want to have, these people involved. And she's like, oh, Austin, that's just a lovely idea. And I'm like, well, thank you. And so I go up to my room, and I'm staying up there, and there's a big bookshelf she's got in the room. And like, I'm looking at the books in the bookshelf, and it's like C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien. And I'm like, she comes up, she's like, is everything okay? And I'm like, it is. And I said, I've just got to ask, are you a Christian? And she's like, oh, yes, I am. And I was like, well, I see you got a lot of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. I was like, the Inklings is actually what inspired this documentary idea. She's like, oh, that's just wonderful, Austin. And she had 10 books by this guy I'd never heard of. And it was a guy named Rowan Williams. And I go, who's this Rowan Williams fellow? You have more books from him. And she's like, oh, Austin, he's just a wonderful man. He's the former head of the Church of England. He's absolutely brilliant. He's got 3 doctorates. He speaks 12 languages, but he's just so humble, and he just embodies the love and compassion of Christ. And she said something, and she goes, and I heard that Richard Dawkins has a soft spot in his heart for Rowan Williams. So I was like, all right, what do I have to lose? What do I have to lose? I was like, I'm going to be the first in line. So I get there at like 7 a.m. There's like, by the time the book signing rolls around 8 a.m., there's like 1,000 people in the line. And I'm like, I have 12 seconds. And so I go up to Richard, and I go, Richard, hey, it's Austin from last night, and Richard's, he's kind of like, he's kind of a shyer guy, and he doesn't like look up when he signs. And he kind of looks up, he goes, yes, and I go, look, we kind of got off to maybe a bad start there last night. I said, well, I've given it some thought. And, like the thing with Alistair, like we kind of talked about it, and maybe he was going to do it, but I didn't know if he really wanted to do it. And like, like I'm more keyed in on the Jonathan Sacks thing. And I said, well, I'm just going to throw out an idea. Oh, and to break the ice, I was like, hey, look, I bought your book. I owed you the $20.
Right.
He kind of chuckled a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I go, well, look, I said, this is random, but what if we had Rowan Williams be in the documentary? And this is a true story. And he looks up at me like this, and he goes, yes, I like Rowan Williams. And I was like, if I get Rowan Williams to do it, will you do the documentary? He goes, yes, I would.
Wow. Wow.
So I was like, well, oh, yeah, I'll go just get in touch with Rowan then. Right? It's like, let me go get in touch with the former Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, just keep in touch with Robin. And so I was like, okay, well, this is something, like this is potentially a big wind in the sail. Like, to make a film, you have to have what's called a hook. And like, unfortunately, like not a lot of people know who Alison McGrath is, but there's a lot of people who know who Richard Dawkins is.
Absolutely.
And so, and you have to think of these things from an economic perspective, right? So I go, and at that time, there's a dear friend of mine named Jonathan Tubner, and Jonathan and I were fraternity brothers at OSU. He was a pledge brother. In a really funny story, and I'm going to embarrass Jonathan, someone dared us one time to ride my motorcycle without shirts on down like the main drag, and we did. That's a different story. Jonathan is now an esteemed Cambridge theologian, and his first book was on the prayers of Augustine.
Oh, wow.
So I got into energy. Jonathan went to Yale and then did Cambridge, and so Rowan was a master at Cambridge, and I go, I was so excited. I think I texted him or I called him. I go, Jonathan, do you know anybody? I think I texted him. I go, do you know anybody that knows Rowan Williams? I go, because at that time, Jonathan was interested in helping out with the project. He goes, I think I got a text back, and maybe there isn't many things. He goes, yes, studied under him, one of my mentors.
Oh my. Wow.
Right? So like
Crazy.
2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, we're in Cambridge pitching Rowan the idea, and Rowan's like, oh, this feels so timely. This would just be great, and he said, yes, I'd love to participate.
Wow.
And like, funny enough, what does Rowan Williams say? He goes, Austin, I think you, Jonathan and Austin, I think you might need to consider this, that I might not resonate with some people in America in terms of the Christian community. He goes, have you thought about Timothy Keller?
Wow.
And Jonathan and I look at each other and we're like, we're working on that. Rowan.
Yeah.
We're working on that. Yeah,
we've noodled it.
we thought about it. Yeah.
God.
So that's like a real fun story. There's a lot more stories, and I know we're probably out of time. But
no, I'm glad you told me, because here's the thing, and this is what's so important for the listener. When this thing comes about, just like every other movie, and in my time with our mutual friend Luke Coffey and being a part of the production of Texas Angel, you realize you think that this was just it's all planned out. There's a script. There's a producer. Steven Spielberg says, yep, I'll do it. The studio says, absolutely, we'll distribute that sucker for you. And, everybody just sits, and then we show up in the theaters, and boom, a movie is made. It's just like a business or anything else.
Oh, gosh, it's a grind.
The stories behind it, and to the listener, let me tell you something. I'm not going to go into it today, but the way I bought my first business was so stupid, and it required so many dominoes to line up just perfectly that were so unlikely. That's how if you're looking for some sort of formula for success that has no risk, that you think you're not going to rely on some modicum of luck and pure just weird circumstances, you are delusional. These things come together, but the key is to do what you did. You must first go. You must first ask. You must first step out. And then let all the craziness happen. And then at the end of the day, if it was supposed to be, and you're willing to hear no, but tell yourself, don't care, I say yes.
Yeah.
Keep going because you believe in it, it will come to pass.
100%. And I forget the quote, but it's the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step.
Amen.
Right?
Amen. That's it.
And it's like so many people are stuck and they don't want to take a step. And it's like, look, it was not for me to go down, and this whole thing starts for me to go down to Austin to hang out with Luke and go hang out on the river and be like, how do you make a documentary? Well, that wasn't hard. And then it's like, okay, well, now I make a couple cold calls.
Yep.
Right? Now you're going to have days like business where you're like, this was really dumb.
Yeah.
What am I doing?
Yeah.
I love. So I think it's Jordan Peterson. And there's a YouTube video, and the guy, Jordan Peterson's talking about, you can relate it to like the journey of Frodo, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like Gandalf comes to Frodo and he's like, I need you to go do this crazy thing. And Frodo's like, where do I even go? He's like, to figure it out, And so like what happens is like, you see this light at the end of the tunnel and you're like, that's where I think I'm supposed to go.
Yeah.
But you don't even know where you're supposed to go.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, what do? You take a step. And then like, well, I didn't get like, someone didn't punch me in the face, right? I'm okay. And so then all of a sudden you take another step. Well, you might even be like kind of stumbling. And a lot of times what we do is we take 3 steps forward and 1 step back. And you're like, well, I burned my hand on that one. That one didn't work.
Exactly.
That's how you learn.
Yeah.
So, and as you go down, as Frodo, and as you go down that journey, what happens is like, well, now you're getting a little more certainty and you're learning. You have to like push your boundaries and learn. And you start to get, what happens? You get more illumination. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, here's the path.
Yeah.
Like, here's the path. Now, it still doesn't mean you're there. And here's the thing. Quoting Jonathan Tubner, life is a pilgrimage. And you never come to this point when it's like, aha, I've got it all down.
Yeah.
It's a pilgrimage until the end,
Amen.
right?
Absolutely.
And so...
Absolutely.
But as you keep going, now you've got more illumination. Now you actually see the real path. And then people are like, well, I kind of want to go on that path, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, well, now people are coming on the path and you got a squad. And then all of a sudden you got, like the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Rings behind you. And you're like, well, now I got my buddies. And and then, but all along you're stumbling towards the light.
That's right.
It's not pretty, and we're human, and it's messy, and the wrong thing to do is stay in the Shire.
Amen.
Amen. The wrong thing to do is to stay in the Shire. So take the first step, and I will encourage, just like you're encouraging the audience. I mean, look, all of us have those things in your heart that you feel like you're called to do, but what do you tell yourself? Well, I got a pretty dang good job.
Yeah.
It probably won't even work.
Yep.
No one's going to watch it. No one's going to read it. That business will never work. And so you talk yourself out of it, and then dying in your bed, to use a quote from Braveheart, dying in your bed many years from now.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that to go back and tell yourself, go take the chance? Right? So I'm getting worked up.
No, but I'm with you. Well, you're talking my language, brother. It's so fun, and again, we could go on and on, but I want to be respectful of both yours and Vic's time.
Can we ask Vic a question or two?
No, I don't think you need that.
What advice do you have for this audience?
How about this, Vic? What's your one dream or passion that you've always wanted to go after?
Helping others to be successful. I think that's the most important thing. And that could be making sure, like, if you talk about the meaning of life, some people will say different things. I think it's waking up in the morning, being excited about what you're going to do in your day.
Yeah.
And then second thing is helping friends and family be successful and being happy, however they define it. And then third is giving back to society, somebody you've never met, making sure that they have the opportunity to be successful and be happy.
Wow. Absolutely. Very well said. And the thing that you said there, because what I've learned as I've gotten older is you hear this whole mantra of gratitude and giving it away. The more you give to others, the more time you spend helping, like you said, family, friends, others, it leaves very little time to dwell on those things in your life that might kind of suck right then. And all of a sudden you realize you're so happy you forget about whatever that thing was that you were creating. So I love that helping others, giving is one of the key ingredients, I think, for joy, for happiness, and well said, man. And right on the spot, brother. Yeah. Thanks for the contribution.
I love, there's a guy named Charlie Mackesy. Are you familiar with this is an artist?
Yeah, I think
he's in England, and he's got a new book out, and it's incredible. It's like a art book, and it's like we here in America especially, like you grow up and in this consumeristic society, what is the message you're taught? It's like the one who wins with the most stuff at the end is the winner, right? And it's like, what are we all looking for? And there's this great portrait, and it's a boy. The book is a story of a boy and a mole and a horse and this fox, and they go on this journey together. And there's a scene where the boy is sitting on a tree branch, and the mole's next to him, looking up at him, and the boy's kind of got his head down, and he goes, to the mole, he goes, what does it mean to have success? And the mole looks up at him and he just goes, to love. To love, like it's not for me to get the most love, although you can get love, but it's just like if you are giving love, that's success.
Absolutely.
That's success.
Absolutely.
I mean, and like, in my last shout out, I'm going to give out a shout out to my mom and dad, Tom and Sherry, who I named Tom and Sherry's Iron in a Bottle after. We celebrated my mom's birthday last night. She's like 33, which is weird because I'm 36.
Wow, what a good son. What a great son.
So like it's like a Benjamin Button situation.
Yeah.
And but anyways, it's like had a conversation, and it kind of like struck me. I had a conversation with my buddy Charlie the other day, and Charlie was talking about how he went home, and Charlie recently got his back injured, and he's like, it's just nice to go home, and my mom just loves to love on me, and like she gets joy out of loving Charlie, because then Charlie naturally wants to love her back. And so it's like this mutual love, and like, instead of this idea, like it's going from an idea from scarcity to abundance. It's like, I'm going to love you because that's what I'm called to do, is to love you unconditionally, even if I disagree with you. And so, to show up and just love that there's nothing wrong with that ever.
Yeah.
And so, I just thought that was so powerful. Like, what is the definition of success? Is it to stack the most zeros in your bank account? Is it to have the most ranches? Is it to have 50 companies? Like what I've learned as I've gotten older is the more companies you have, actually, the more stress it creates.
Yeah.
And so it's like, no, it's pretty simple, says the mole. And isn't it amazing that it's the mole who says it?
Yeah.
To love.
Yeah. I love it. Austin, this has been a blast, my brother. I appreciate the time. From OSU cowboy to oil and gas success story to documentary filmmaker to, we didn't even talk about some of your other businesses, dating app.
Vouch dating app, which Vouch dating app, it's less shade, more fun, much love. We're actually trying to do like this hybrid nonprofit where our revenue we funnel back out to couples that maybe couldn't afford a babysitter or go on fun trips or dates. Like, it's part of this, like, hey, the world doesn't need another dating app. It does need a little more fun, a little more hope, and a little more love. And so we try, and I think the new B Corp model it's the model of the future. To shout out to Dennis Bernstein, CEO, former Dollar Shave Club guy. He running Tom and Sherry's Iron and Bottle. It's a plant-based wrinkle releaser spray for clothing because ironing sucks. And in our first year we got into Oprah's magazine, Good Morning America, The View. We're about to get into Bed Bath & Beyond, so keep an eye out for it. It's real blue bottle. Everything's made here in America. We give a portion of every bottle back to cool charities. And then if I'm shouting people out, I'm gonna also shout out to my sister and brother-in-law, Katie and Bronson Burgoon. Bronson's actually an incredible golfer on the PGA Tour, great heart. Katie's got a great baby, nephew named Beckham. He's like become a joy in my life. And then shout out to my brother, Clay Eudaly, who is an incredible human being. And so I just want to thank you, Jason. This has been a blast. You called me like 2 days ago.
Yeah,
2 days ago.
Fast, man.
We're sitting in the Meadows building, and Vic shows up, and this has been amazing. So I look forward to more conversations with you, and I think hopefully this leads to a long friendship. And
absolutely.
If I can be of any help to you, just let me know. So
thank you, brother. You've been a great help, and you're very deserving of the title, Texas Titan. Thanks, Austin.
I don't think I do, but thank you for that. So.
All right, brother. Thanks so much. Hey, folks, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Texas Titans podcast. Before you go, I wanted to let you know where you can find us out there on the interwebs. You can go to show notes as well as listen to all the past episodes and look for upcoming shows at textitans.blog. Also, that has all the different formats that you can listen to the show on if you go there. So textitans.blog. You can also go to jasonwrightnow.com. That has not only a link to the podcast, but it also has a link to my Make Your Own Rules blog that I think you'll enjoy, so please check that out. Also, it has information about my executive coaching business, speaking, and anything else like that. So jasonwrightnow.com. That's literally just my name, jasonwrightnow.com. On Twitter, I'm at jasonwrightTX. I would really appreciate a follow. I have not been a big Twitter user, so I need you guys to help me with that. So please take the time to go out to jasonwrightTX, find me, and follow me. I'm trying to get more active with it, and so if you'll engage with me, I'll try to do a better job of engaging with you. So I would appreciate that. And then on Instagram, I'd really appreciate a follow there. I'm at Jason Wright Now. Again, my name, Now. So please follow me on Instagram. And then on Facebook, I'm also at Jason Wright TX. So check us out there. And I'm also on LinkedIn, so look for me there. I try to use as many platforms as possible to let you know about upcoming shows, past shows, and then also just anything that I find interesting. I'm trying to push it out and get better with the social media. So please check us out there and follow us. I would be most grateful. And also, please do not forget, it means the world to me for you to go to iTunes, give us a rating. Right now, we've got that 5-star rating. I'm hoping to hold that. Please, please, please. The comments that people are writing are so very kind. Thank you so much. It means the world to me. And that's how we keep moving up in the ranks. And right now, we're crushing it with downloads. The show has really had incredible feedback thanks to you guys. So I'm grateful. Please keep that momentum going by giving us a review on iTunes. Thanks so much and have a great day. And as always, I could not be more grateful for you listening. Thanks.